Dr. Diane Sanchez.
Hi, Dr. Diane Sanchez. Do you identify yourself as a Latina?
Yes.
Where and when were you born?
I was born in El Paso, Texas on September 23rd, 1961.
Who were your parents and siblings?
Cecilia and Fred Sanchez were my parents, and my sibling, I have one, and it's Carol Sanchez.
What did your parents do for a living?
My father was a draftsman for the city of Downey, and my mother was a programmer for Cerritos, California. We moved to California.
Describe the neighborhood you grew up in.
A nice community. It was not by any means wealthy. I would say mid-income. They both worked, so we were lucky. This was their first and only house they bought. So it was a good mix of all diversity.
And who are some of your role models?
Well, I went to Catholic school, so all through 8th grade and high school. So I would say a lot of them were the nuns. They had a lot of influence on me. The other thing is I was very involved in student government, and there was an association of Catholic school student government leaders. And so Sister Marilyn led it, Sister Dolores Marie, those really were my inspiration. So they were really role models.
Well, you've already said that you went to Catholic school. Is there anything else you want to describe about your religious affiliation in your youth?
Yep, I'm Catholic. I grew up Catholic, very Catholic, and went through Catholic school, like I said, for 12 years, and I absolutely loved it. I was lucky because my parents both worked, so I was able to do that, and the public schools were just not conducive in the area, but my parents really wanted me to have a Catholic education.
And where did you go to church?
St. Linus, for my life, I think, till in California. Then when I went to UCLA, I went to the church there on campus, Catholic church on campus.
And what about your school?
School?
Yeah, where did you go to school?
UCLA.
UCLA.
For my undergrad, and got my master's in Arizona, and then later my PhD. So UCLA was terrific because I really, growing up Catholic, I only knew Catholicism. And I had Buddhist friends and Jewish friends, and so it really opened my eyes up to other religions. But most of my roommates, we all met at the church, so we were all Catholic. So that was terrific because I wouldn't have found those roommates, and they're still lifelong friends because we're all Catholic. We grew up in the Catholic faith, so it was really inspirational for me.
What other community organizations were important to your upbringing?
The Catholic Association of Student Councils I was very, very involved in. Student organization, my student council. I was student body president, senior year president. I was the 8th grade president. So I was very, very involved. And the Catholic student council group I was involved with had leaders from all the Catholic schools in California. So we ran leadership camps for Catholic school student body people. And we taught them all about how to run for office, how to run their meetings, why student council was important at school, why it's important to stay involved. The other thing I was involved in was the Young Democrats. So I worked on a campaign, and I really, my degree is in political science because I thought I wanted to go into politics. But after working on a campaign, I don't know that I wanted to do that. But it really taught me a lot about the political system, what it takes, knocking on doors, especially coming in from a Latino community, because most of my family all lived in a Latino community. Unfortunately, we don't go out and vote. And so knocking on doors to families, please vote. It was a really neat experience for me. So I did that in almost every year until I was about 18. And then, of course, the student organizations at UCLA, I was involved at Bruin Bells, which is 100 ladies that are the dignitaries that welcome other dignitaries to the school. And so that was really a terrific organization, because I wasn't in a sorority. So it was really, those were probably the big ones.
Now changing a little bit the conversation, what is the role of women in public life?
Are you talking about elected public life or just general public life?
General public life.
What is the role of women?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think we have a great opportunity. Now that I'm in human resources now, so I do a lot of research. We're 50% of the workforce, and many of us are single moms. We have a great opportunity to show our education, our commitment to our work, commitment to our families. And the other thing that's really important is our faith, because we lead our families to the faith we have. And it's not a slam against men, but women really are the family member that leads the family to education, to religion, all of that. So I think our role in public is that we talk about those things as being important to other women, and that we've got to, once you leave the family, you don't have a lot of support other than, your community, because I've moved from California, so I have no family here. So other women have become my inspiration, and I see them in public and what they do in the communities, and I just want to get more involved, and I think we should get more involved in our communities because it's important for our children.
And you touched on this a little bit. What is the role of women in the home life?
Big role. Whether you're a single mom or whether you're part of a partnership, I think it's very critical for the women to have a good, strong foundation for the family. And I mean, it is everything from health to religion to education to all facets of life, because we're forming our children. And I'm not discounting the role of men, but women seem to be the ones, at least I know, that do the majority of that kind of rearing. Now we may ask for support from men, but I do think that we have a fantastic role, and I think it's critically important for our families.
How are women treated by religious institutions?
You read about religious persecution around the world, and that really bothers me, where they're tortured for their faith or because they've done some kind of indiscretion. I will talk about the Catholic Church. I'm a Eucharistic minister, but that came at a very, later. I think the church is progressing with having women more involved in the church. I'd like to see more of it, but they're coming along. I think they're treated, at least in the Catholic faith, very respectfully. But I know in other religions, that's not always the case.
Describe what you learned as a child about how women ought to relate to men.
Well, my father had rheumatoid arthritis and was bedridden for most of his life. Then he got into a wheelchair and eventually walked. So he really was my caregiver for the first 7 years. And I got a very strong sense from him and the rest of the family of great respect for men. He was very much a role model because of the pain he was in with his arthritis and his commitment. I mean, he left El Paso with no family and my mother and came to California, and then the family finally progressed over from El Paso to California, which happened to a lot of Hispanics. That's why California is so populated, and now just, has beaten white population. So that's why California is just really, everybody had moved there because of the work. But my uncles and my great uncles, I mean, I was always respectful of them. I think in the Latino community, they really take care of their families. And then, of course, being around priests. I served the priests. That's what I did after school. And so I was very respectful of men. I know that's not always the case, from family abuse or whatever, but for my family, it was very respectful. And so I think I have a good, healthy feeling about men, and I respect them because they're smart, they're hardworking. I think genuinely they care about their families. They care about stuff women care about.
Now, what is your view of God?
I kind of left my faith for a while. I went through a divorce about 17 years ago. Became a single mom, unbeknownst to me. And I was very angry. And I had always believed that God would provide. And so I lost kind of hope. I really did. And Texas is great because it's the Bible Belt. And although there are limited Catholic churches here, I found a Christian church, kind of non-denominational, very good for my kids because it was very different than how I grew up. And so they go every Wednesday to Bible study, which I hadn't had. And so I now go every Wednesday to Bible study. We go to church. We go to both a Catholic church and a Christian church. So we do two churches. But I would say my faith really shifted about 6 years ago because I feared that I had cancer. I was going through oncology tests. They didn't know what was wrong with me. And that really changed me. I think when you realize that your life may be in jeopardy, God becomes that much more important because you can't rely on yourself, right? And there is a higher power. So I would say God has gone through phases in my life where it was very strong up until college, and then It wasn't, and now it's very strong. So I read the Bible every day. It's part of my prayers every day. He is very instrumental in my whole family, because that's what we pray every day. I mean, it has become a very big part of our family. And God's very important.
What have been some of the obstacles you have encountered as a woman?
So I talk about being a single mom. I had very little financial support through college. I did not get a lot of student help back then. So that was a struggle. I had to work 40 hours while I went to UCLA. And then I basically forged my way. I left my family for personal reasons after college. I struggled with some of the things that was happening in the family. And so I left and started my career basically by myself. And so that was a hardship. My family became the friends I chose. Those were my family, my college roommates and all that. So that was a struggle for me. And then just being a woman, a Latina woman, I worked for Coke and Pepsi and Boeing and American Airlines, and came to Texas with Burlington Northern Santa Fe, which was 95% white male, and Boeing, almost 98% white male. So being a very strong Latina in those companies where you walked into a room and there were no other women of color was really hard, very hard. Because your question of being in the public is that you are not only representing yourself in those corporations, but the rest of the Latinas that are out there. You realize, wow, this may be the only opportunity they have to see a Latina in corporate America, right? And I took that role really seriously. Because back then in the 80s and 90s, I mean, I was a labor contract negotiator for Coke, and all men Teamsters in a room, and I was the only negotiator. I mean, they wondered why the heck a woman, especially a young woman, was there. So it was a really, I felt like I really forged corporate America for other Latina women, and that was a struggle because you have no real friends or somebody you can associate with or ask how to do things. So I really then decided I needed a male mentor. And so every place I went and found a male mentor, white male mentor, who would help me understand the politics. And that helped me become, a regular employee to a vice president of major corporations. And I wouldn't have gotten there without those mentors. But it was a struggle. And I say a struggle because I think we have to prove ourselves that much more because we're an unknown entity in corporate America. At least I was, right? At least then Latinas were. You didn't see them in managerial or director level or vice president level. You just didn't. I mean, I was the only Latina at American Airlines as vice president. That was it. So, out of 50 officers. And at Boeing, it was, I think, 3 women of color out of 100 vice presidents. So, there wasn't a lot of us there. And I think that was a huge struggle for me, because I always wondered, gosh, am I doing the right thing? Not just for myself and career, but for fellow Latinas who see me, right, as a potential role model and say, hey, I want to be like her or in that spot. That's a huge responsibility. And I didn't take it lightly. And so I was always really concerned about what I did and how I looked and how I projected. And when I was in meetings, it was just a lot of pressure I put on myself, right? So that was a struggle. And so, I think us Latinas who kind of forged that would all say it was a struggle in corporate America, and it still is. Even in the profession that I am as a professor, there are very few Latinas who have a PhD or who have masters. And so you're setting that bar for what others look at in your professions. And that's a challenge. And then, of course, personally, I'm a strong Latina, and some kind of, sometimes men go, whoa, she's a little much. But I think that comes from my father. My sister and I are very strong Latinas, and that had a lot to do with him. He wanted his girls to be strong Latinas and not rely on anybody but yourself, get an education, earn your way, and lead others. And that's what we both did, because she's an executive and I became an executive. So yeah, it was a struggle though.
Now, with these obstacles that you've encountered, what has been the role of religion as you've encountered them?
Yeah, you pray every time you leave someplace or before you go in. Like I said, I probably fell away from my faith during those times in corporate America. You see things that go against your value system, and greed, and I mean, there's good parts of corporate America, but there's not so good parts. And being in human resources, I think you see the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so you wonder really if those commandments really matter, like do unto others as you would like them to do unto you, or be respectful, or don't lie or cheat or steal. And you see things like that happen. So like I said, I fell away. But now it is very much part, because I work for a Christian university. It's very important to me now that my faith drives what I do, and that I have my own business. I only take clients that correspond with my value system, and most of them are Christians. And if there's any kind of issues, I don't take them on as a client if I feel like their faith doesn't lead their integrity or their things that they do. So faith is a big, big part of leading my life, especially in my profession now, because I've got to be a role model for other students that are in my school too.
And how do you define success?
Okay, so if you had asked me that when I was 40 in corporate America, I would have said money and position power and, driving the Mercedes, and, that's what our society says is success. That was what I thought it was. And then I got to the top job, the head of HR for a big company. I was making a ton of money. I was driving the Mercedes. I had a big house. And I was really unhappy. And I realized, this is not success, because I am miserable. I wasn't spending time with my kids. My son has autism. I had nannies because I was a single mom, and I had a big job. And I just said, this is not success anymore, because I don't feel good inside. So I think my definition has changed, because I think success is, one, you feel good inside about the life you're leading. And the other thing is that I really believe that, we're put on this earth to find our successful relationship with God. It's called the driven purpose life or purpose-driven life, but this life has a purpose, and that purpose is finding your relationship with God, and that gives you peace, and that really drives your success, because it's how you feel inside, right? I mean, it is really paramount that you have that relationship. And I didn't get that when I was younger. And I have to thank Texas, because, there's a lot more churches here than there was in California. As the nuns would say, the heathens of UCLA, they didn't have that much religion. But so now success to me is having that relationship with God. Then that comes having my relationship with my family, my loved ones, my relationships with my students, with my clients. That is success to me now. It's not the stuff. I got rid of the big house. I got rid of the, Mercedes. I got rid of all of that because it wasn't making me happy. And now I am probably the happiest I've ever been in the last 2 years, because I have walked in faith. And when I have those times where it's not going great, and there are, trust me, I mean, my son with autism, every day I can get really down about it, because their father's not involved. They've never been involved. So their father has never been involved in their lives. So it's just me. And that's a huge responsibility, but that's also huge pressure. And so but I'm the happiest because I have that successful relationship with God. And when I am not feeling good, I go back to that and go back to Him and say, you have the plan. You know the plan. I don't know it now, and I can't manage it, and I can't figure it out, but I know it'll be there. And it always does. And when I forced it before, when I thought, I can do this myself, I'm going to do this myself, I can do it, it didn't work out. Because, He keeps telling you, you got to walk with me, you got to walk with me. And you're not walking with me. And I finally got it. So that's success to me. That is it, is walking in faith with Him and learning about Him. And that's life. Why are we here? Is to learn about our faith and God. That makes it successful. Everything else goes into place.
Well, you've kind of answered the next question, which was what makes you a successful woman. Is there anything else you want to add?
You know, the only other thing I want to add is one, my Bible study too. You know, I have a bunch of faithful ladies that I stay in, but my family, my kids, and they make me feel successful. Some days it's rotten being a parent, but I know I'm creating human beings that are gonna contribute to society, contribute to their faith. I mean, my son wants to be a pastor. You know, he's autistic and he wants to be a pastor to autistic children. What greater success is that I could have as a parent, you know? That's why he wants to come to TCU. You know, he wants to get into religious studies, and you know, wow. He's not saying I want to drive a Mercedes, I want a big house, I want to do this. So it's my family too that makes me successful.
And you've talked about what role religion has played in you achieving your success. It's been a big part. Anything else you want to add to that?
No, I think the only other thing I would say is, you know, we all go through our cycles of life, and I believe, you know, I'm thankful that I had a foundation of religion when I was young. I think we always go back to what we had when we were young because we remember it in a positive way. Even though as adults we get mad and we say, oh, you know, we're not going to participate in this religion and go to church. We're going to party and have fun. But I think eventually as you get older and you start having kids, you realize, wow, this is very important for their lives as well as mine. So I just think those people who struggle with faith, I always say, you know what, it'll happen. It'll happen. You'll have that aha moment, right? Where you say, oh my gosh, I need God. I need faith. I need religion. I need something because I can't do it on my own. And I think all of us go through that. That's our journey.
The last question to this is, has religion ever hindered your success?
Hindered my success? No, I don't see it as hindering. I think I hindered my success by, you know, not participating fully in the church I was involved in. So, no, it never hindered me. No, I would say no.
Well, that's the end.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.